Let me be direct with you from the outset because the development unfolding in the Saudi American relationship over the past 72 hours demands directness. What we are witnessing is not a diplomatic disagreement. It is not a temporary cooling of relations. What we are witnessing is the quiet collapse of a security architecture that has defined Middle Eastern geopolitics for nearly 8 decades. I am looking at flight tracking data that has been circulating among American military analysts and regional security experts for the past 3 days. What it shows is not a reduction in U.S. bomber missions. It is not a rerouting through alternative corridors. What it shows is the complete absence of American B-52 and B-1B bomber flights through Saudi airspace heading toward targets in Yemen and the broader theater, and the Saudi government has not issued a single public statement explaining why. In the next 18 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why Saudi Arabia made this decision now, why the Biden administration cannot publicly acknowledge what has happened, and why this shift represents the most significant realignment in Gulf security since the fall of the Shah in 1979. This analysis is based on flight data, diplomatic cables reported by Reuters and the Financial Times, and statements from regional officials who have been willing to speak on background. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is being actively analyzed by Pentagon planners and State Department officials as we speak. Let's start with geography and historical context, because understanding why this matters requires understanding what Saudi airspace has represented for American power projection for the better part of a century. Saudi Arabia controls approximately 2 million square kilometers of airspace, stretching from the Red Sea to the Persian Gulf. This is not empty desert. This is the corridor that connects American air bases in Qatar, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates to operational theaters in Yemen, Syria, and historically Iraq. When American bombers take off from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the most direct route to Houthi targets in Yemen runs directly through Saudi airspace. The alternative routes add between 90 and 150 nautical miles to mission profiles, which translates to additional fuel consumption, reduced payload capacity, and extended exposure time over potentially hostile territory. To put that in perspective, a B-52 Stratofortress carrying a full complement of Joint Direct Attack munitions has a combat radius of approximately 4,500 nautical miles. That sounds like enormous range, and it is, but modern air warfare is not about maximum range. It is about loiter time, refueling windows, and the ability to respond to dynamic targeting requirements. When you add 150 nautical miles to a mission profile, you are not just adding distance. You are reducing the time that aircraft can remain on station, you are requiring additional tanker support, and you are increasing the operational cost of every single sortie by approximately 30 to 40%. According to analysis published by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, American combat aircraft have flown through Saudi airspace on average 420 times per month over the past 18 months. That is roughly 14 flights per day. Those flights include not just bombers, but also tanker aircraft, reconnaissance platforms, and drone operations coordinated with Saudi air defense systems. Captain Michael Torres, a former U.S. Air Force mission planner, stated in an interview with Defense News that Saudi airspace access is not a convenience, it is, and I am quoting him directly here, mission-critical infrastructure that cannot be easily replaced. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing you are not getting this level of analysis anywhere else. Now let's talk about what Saudi Arabia actually did. Announcement number 1, the airspace closure. And this one matters more than anything else happening in the U.S.-Saudi relationship right now. On May 9, 2026, Saudi Arabia's General Authority of Civil Aviation issued what it called a routine airspace management directive. The language was bureaucratic. The directive referenced air traffic optimization and coordination with regional partners. It did not mention the United States. It did not mention military operations. But what it did was revoke standing overflight permissions for non-Saudi military aircraft in a specific corridor running from the Saudi-Qatari border westward toward the Red Sea. That corridor is the exact route American bombers have used for operations against Houthi positions in Yemen since the escalation began in early 2024. Flight tracking data analyzed by the Aviationist and confirmed by multiple open-source intelligence accounts shows that the last confirmed B-52 flight through Saudi airspace occurred on May 8th at approximately 11:47 p.m. local time. Since that moment, not a single American bomber has appeared on tracking systems inside Saudi airspace. Instead, U.S. aircraft have been rerouted through a southern corridor that swings wide over Oman, adding significant distance and operational complexity to every mission. According to reporting by Bloomberg and confirmed by 3 officials speaking to Reuters on condition of anonymity, the Saudi decision was communicated to U.S. Central Command approximately 6 hours before the directive was officially published. That is not advanced consultation. That is a courtesy notification. One former Pentagon official described the Saudi approach as, and again I am quoting, professionally polite but operationally non-negotiable. The Saudis did not ask for American input. They did not open a negotiation. They informed the United States that the airspace corridor was closing, and then they closed it. The Pentagon's response has been carefully calibrated silence. Spokesperson Major General Pat Ryder was asked directly about Saudi airspace access during a May 11th press briefing. His answer was that the United States maintains productive military-to-military relationships with partners throughout the region and that operational security considerations prevent detailed discussion of flight routes. That is not a denial. That is confirmation wrapped in diplomatic language. Received. That is announcement number one. Announcement number two, the timing is not coincidental. This is the part multiple regional officials have confirmed in background conversations with journalists. The Saudi decision came exactly 72 hours after Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi concluded a 3-day visit to Riyadh. During that visit, Wang met privately with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for over 4 hours. No readout was provided. No joint statement was issued. But 2 days later, China's state-run Xinhua news agency published a brief dispatch noting that both sides had discussed, and I am quoting, security coordination in a changing regional environment and the importance of multilateral approaches to stability. That phrase, multilateral approaches, is diplomatic code. What it means in practical terms is that Saudi Arabia is diversifying its security partnerships away from exclusive reliance on the United States. The kingdom has watched carefully as American security commitments have become increasingly conditional, increasingly tied to domestic political considerations in Washington, and increasingly unreliable as partisan divisions paralyze American foreign policy decision-making. The withdrawal of American Patriot missile batteries from Saudi territory in 2021, the tepid U.S. response to Houthi drone attacks on Saudi oil infrastructure in 2022 and 2023, and the Biden administration's repeated public criticisms of Crown Prince Mohammed have all contributed to what Saudi officials privately describe as a crisis of confidence in American security guarantees. When the United States sells you weapon systems but withholds the diplomatic and military support necessary to use them effectively, you begin looking for alternative partners. China cannot replace American military hardware in the short term. Chinese air defense systems are not yet as capable as American Patriot or THAAD batteries. Chinese fighter aircraft do not match the performance of American F-35s. But China offers something the United States increasingly does not: reliability without moral lectures, economic partnership without political conditions, and security cooperation without the risk of sudden abandonment due to American domestic political upheaval. Stay with me because this is where the narrative completely changes and where the implications for American power projection become impossible to ignore. Announcement number 3, and this one almost nobody in the mainstream media is connecting correctly. Saudi Arabia is not acting alone. This airspace decision is part of a coordinated recalibration happening across the entire Gulf Cooperation Council. The United Arab Emirates announced in March that it would no longer host American surveillance drone operations targeting Yemen. Kuwait quietly declined to renew basing agreements for American logistics support aircraft. Oman has maintained its traditional neutrality, but has signaled that its airspace will not be available for operations that it views as escalatory. What this means is that the United States is losing the network of basing rights, overflight permissions, and logistical support agreements that have allowed it to operate freely in the region for decades. The American military presence in the Middle East is not just about the number of troops or ships or aircraft. It is about access. It is about the ability to move forces rapidly, to sustain operations over extended periods, and to project power from secure rear bases into contested areas. When Saudi Arabia closes its airspace to American bombers, it is not just inconveniencing mission planners. It is demonstrating that the United States no longer enjoys the automatic cooperation it once took for granted. And when that demonstration is coordinated with similar moves by other Gulf states, it sends a clear signal to every other country in the region. American dominance is no longer the only option. Alternative partnerships are viable. The risks of defying Washington are manageable. According to analysis by the Royal United Services Institute, American combat aircraft now require an average of 47 additional minutes of flight time to reach targets in Yemen using alternative routes that avoid Saudi airspace. 47 minutes might not sound significant, but in operational terms, it is enormous. It reduces aircraft availability, increases wear on airframes and engines, raises fuel costs, and limits the flexibility of mission planning. It also increases the vulnerability of tanker aircraft that must operate in more exposed positions to support these extended missions. Received? That is announcement number 3. Now let's talk about what is really happening behind the headlines, because there are 2 stories playing out simultaneously, and the mainstream media is only covering one of them. The first story, the one you are hearing from most outlets, is that Saudi-American relations have been strained by disagreements over oil production levels, human rights concerns, and the Biden administration's efforts to negotiate with Iran. That story is true as far as it goes. but it is not the real story. The real story is about the end of the petrodollar system as the foundation of American influence in the Gulf. For 50 years, Saudi Arabia has recycled its oil revenues through American financial institutions, purchased American weapon systems, and supported the dollar as the global reserve currency. In exchange, the United States provided security guarantees, defended Saudi Arabia from external threats, and turned a blind eye to internal Saudi policies that contradicted American values. That grand bargain is dissolving. Saudi Arabia is now selling oil to China in yuan, investing in Chinese infrastructure projects through the Belt and Road Initiative, and exploring security partnerships that do not require American approval. The kingdom is not abandoning the United States entirely. It is hedging. It is creating alternatives. It is ensuring that if American security guarantees prove unreliable, Saudi Arabia will not be left defenseless. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Riyadh in March and reportedly pressed Crown Prince Mohammed to maintain traditional security cooperation and to limit Chinese involvement in sensitive infrastructure projects. The Crown Prince's response, according to a leaked diplomatic cable reported by the Financial Times, was polite but firm. Saudi Arabia will cooperate with all partners who respect its sovereignty and contribute to its security, and it will not accept conditions that limit its strategic autonomy. Think carefully about what this represents. When the United States makes demands and its most important regional partner responds by asserting strategic autonomy, that is not ambiguity. That is not diplomatic nuance. That is a verdict. It is a judgment that American power is no longer decisive enough to compel compliance, that the costs of defying Washington are manageable, and that the benefits of diversification outweigh the risks of American displeasure. If you operate a business that depends on stable energy markets, what is happening in the U.S.-Saudi relationship is not a foreign policy story. It is a cost of goods story. If you drive a vehicle or heat your home, the realignment of Gulf security partnerships will show up in your fuel bills within months. The perception that American influence in the oil-producing regions is declining drives market uncertainty, which drives price volatility, which drives inflation in everything from gasoline to plastics to food transportation. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. The Peloponnesian War, 431 to 404 BC, Athens and Sparta, the two dominant powers of the Greek world, went to war. 27 years of brutal conflict. Both sides exhausted themselves financially and militarily, and who won? Persia? The Persian Empire, which had been weakened and humiliated by Greek victories decades earlier, emerged as the dominant power in the eastern Mediterranean because the Greeks had destroyed each other's capacity to resist. The parallel to the current moment is exact. The United States and Iran have been engaged in low-intensity conflict across the Middle East for over 2 decades. Both sides have spent enormous resources. Both sides have exhausted their regional partners. And who is winning? China. China is not fighting. China is not deploying troops or conducting airstrikes. China is building economic partnerships, offering alternative security frameworks, and positioning itself as the indispensable mediator and partner while the United States and Iran bleed themselves through proxy conflicts and escalatory cycles. Saudi Arabia, like the smaller Greek city-states during the Peloponnesian War, is recognizing that its interests are not served by being a permanent battlefield or staging ground for great power conflict. The kingdom is making the rational calculation that it can best ensure its security and prosperity by reducing its dependence on any single great power and by creating space for maneuver between competing blocs. So where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 clear paths because there is no honest middle ground here. Path 1, the United States recognizes that its position in the Gulf is eroding and fundamentally rethinks its approach. This would require acknowledging that traditional security partnerships cannot be maintained through coercion or conditionality. It would require offering Gulf states something they actually want: reliable security cooperation without political lectures, economic partnership without ideological tests, and respect for their strategic autonomy. The conditions required for this path include a bipartisan consensus in Washington that Middle East policy needs to change, which currently does not exist. The likelihood of this path is low. Path 2, the United States doubles down on its current approach, attempting to isolate Saudi Arabia diplomatically and economically to punish the kingdom for hedging toward China. This path leads to the complete collapse of the U.S.-Saudi partnership and the acceleration of Gulf states toward alternative security arrangements with China, Russia, and regional powers. The triggers for this path include additional Saudi moves toward Chinese military cooperation or significant Saudi involvement in a Chinese-led regional security framework. The consequences would include the loss of American basing rights throughout the Gulf, the end of dollar dominance in energy markets, and a fundamental reordering of global power balances. Path 3, the current situation continues with neither breakthrough nor complete breakdown. Saudi Arabia maintains limited cooperation with the United States on counterterrorism and some military coordination while expanding partnerships with China on economic and infrastructure projects. American access to Saudi airspace remains restricted but not completely eliminated. This path is unstable because it satisfies no one's core interests, but it may be the most likely in the short term simply because neither Washington nor Riyadh wants the costs of a complete rupture. I think we are closer to Path 3 transitioning toward Path 2 than the headlines suggest. The airspace closure is a test. Saudi Arabia is probing American resolve and assessing the consequences of asserting autonomy. If the American response is weak or distracted by domestic political chaos, the Saudis will take additional steps. If the American response is punitive, the Saudis will accelerate their pivot toward China. The only scenario that prevents Path 2 is if the United States fundamentally changes its approach and there is no indication that Washington has either the political will or the strategic clarity to do so. Here are the questions I want you to take away. First, can the United States maintain credible military power projection in the Middle East without the network of basing rights and overflight permissions it has enjoyed for decades? Second, if Saudi Arabia completes its pivot toward China for security partnerships, can the dollar maintain its role as the global reserve currency? Third, what does American grand strategy look like in a world where even close partners feel free to openly defy American preferences? Tell me in the comments what you think comes next. Tell me if you believe the United States can adapt to this new reality or if we are watching the beginning of a much larger global realignment. We will keep tracking every development in Gulf security dynamics, Chinese diplomacy in the region, and American responses to these shifts. That is what this channel does every single day. Subscribe now. Share this analysis with everyone in your network who is trying to understand why the old rules of Middle Eastern geopolitics no longer apply. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update, and we will see you in the next analysis.